A single diplomatic demand from China could reshape the entire global technology supply chain, and India is caught right in the middle. What's happening right now could determine whether you'll be able to afford your next smartphone, whether electric vehicles will become mainstream, and quite frankly, which superpower controls the future of technology. Here's what's happening. China is now demanding written guarantees from India, legally binding promises that rare earth minerals imported by Indian companies will not be diverted to the United States. Yes, you heard that right. China wants India to sign on the dotted line, essentially choosing sides in the new Cold War over technology supremacy. The real stakes, and this isn't just about some obscure minerals buried underground. This is about your smartphone, your laptop, the electric car you might buy, the wind turbines generating clean energy, the guided missiles protecting nations, and the MRI machine that could save your life. Every single piece of modern technology depends on these materials. Without them, the 21st century as we know it stops. Context setting. So what exactly are rare earth elements? Think of them as the vitamins of modern industry. You only need tiny amounts, but without them, nothing works. They're a group of 17 metallic elements with exotic names like neodymium, dysprosium, and yttrium. They create the powerful magnets in electric motors, the colors in your screen, the precision in military targeting systems. And here's the kicker. China controls roughly 70% of the world's rare earth production and a staggering 85 to 90% of processing capacity. That means even if you mine these minerals in Australia, Africa, or America, they probably still go to China to be refined into usable materials. Why this matters now? Why does this matter right now? Because the timing couldn't be more critical. The United States and China are locked in an escalating tech war. America is desperately trying to build supply chains that don't depend on Beijing. India, meanwhile, is emerging as a major manufacturing hub and a key U.S. partner through the Quad alliance with Japan and Australia. So we have a triangle. China holds the resources. India needs those resources for its booming tech and manufacturing sectors. And the United States wants India as an alternative supplier to break free from Chinese dependence. China just threw a wrench into this whole arrangement by essentially telling India, you can buy from us, but you better not help the Americans. What's at stake? Technology. The semiconductor chips, smartphones, laptops, and servers that power our digital world all need rare earths. Economy. The electric vehicle revolution, which represents trillions of dollars in future economic value, cannot happen without these minerals. Every Tesla, every BYD, every electric bus needs rare earth magnets. Geopolitical power. Whoever controls these supply chains controls which countries can build advanced weapons systems, who can transition to green energy, and ultimately, who holds technological superiority in the 21st century. National security. We're not exaggerating when we say that F-35 fighter jets, Patriot missiles, nuclear submarines, and satellite systems all depend on rare earth elements. Military power in the modern age is impossible without them. This is China using its resource dominance as a geopolitical weapon, and India is the testing ground. Video roadmap. In this video, we're going to break down this entire situation so you understand exactly what is happening and why it matters. Here's what we'll cover. First, we lines explain what rare earth elements actually are and why they recalled the vitamins of modern industry. What makes them so irreplaceable in everything from your iPhone to an aircraft carrier. Second, we lines explore how China achieved near total dominance over rare earth production, controlling 70% of mining and 90% of processing, and why this didn't happen by accident, but through decades of strategic planning. Third, we lines look at India's position. Why does a country with its own significant rare earth deposits still import heavily from China? What's India's role in global tech manufacturing, and why is India so important to both China and the United States? Fourth, and this is the explosive part, Tweelines break down China's demand for written guarantees. What exactly are they asking for? Why now? What are the legal implications? And what does this mean for Indian companies caught in the middle? Fifth, we'll analyze the geopolitical implications. How does this affect the U.S. strategy to counter China? What does it mean for the Quad Alliance? How are other countries like Japan, South Korea, and the European Union watching this unfold? And finally, we'll walk through the possible scenarios. What could happen next? Will India comply? Will they resist? Could the U.S. intervene? What are the likely outcomes? And what does each mean for global technology and power dynamics engagement prompt? But before we dive deep into this geopolitical chess match, do me a quick favor. If you're interested in understanding the geopolitics shaping our world, the technology wars between superpowers, and the economic forces that affect your daily life, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story is developing rapidly. China's export controls are tightening, the U.S. is pouring billions into alternative supply chains, and India is making decisions right now that will echo for decades. You'll want to stay updated as this unfolds. Also, drop a comment below and let me know, do you think India should sign China's guarantee, refuse it outright, or try to negotiate a middle ground? I'm genuinely curious what you think, because there are no easy answers here. Alright, let's get into transition to main content to understand why China has this much leverage and why this demand is so significant. We first need to understand what rare earth elements actually are. Rare earth elements, or REs as they recalled in the industry, are a group of 17 metallic elements on the periodic table. Now, I know what you're thinking. 17 elements. That sounds complicated. And you're right, it is. But here's what you need to know. These include elements with exotic names like neodymium, dysprosium, yttrium, lanthanum, cerium, europium, and terbium. And here's the funny thing about the name rare earth elements. They are not actually rare at all. In fact, cerium is more abundant in the Earth's crust than copper. Even the least common rare earth element is 200 times more abundant than gold. So why are they called rare? The answer is simple. They're incredibly difficult and expensive to extract and refine. Unlike gold or copper that can be found in concentrated deposits, rare earths are scattered throughout the Earth's crust in tiny concentrations. They're almost never found in pure form. They're mixed together with other elements in complex mineral ores. Separating them requires sophisticated chemical processes that are expensive, time-consuming, and generate massive amounts of toxic waste. That's the real challenge. It's not that they're scarce, it's that getting them into a usable form is extraordinarily difficult. Why they're critical now? Why are these elements so critical that China can use them as a geopolitical weapon? Let me show you exactly where rare earths show up in your daily life, and I guarantee you'll be surprised. Consumer electronics. That's smartphone in your pocket or purse. It contains at least 6 different rare earth elements. The vibration motor uses neodymium magnets. The screen uses europium and terbium for color display. The speakers use neodymium and praseodymium. Even the glass has cerium oxide for polishing. Your laptop, tablet, headphones, all of them are packed with rare earths. Green technology. This is huge. Every electric vehicle motor relies on powerful neodymium dysprosium magnets. A single Tesla Model 3 uses about 1 kilogram of rare earth elements just in the motor magnets. Wind turbines. Each large wind turbine requires approximately 600 pounds of rare earth magnets. Without rare earths, the entire green energy transition, which the world is betting trillions of dollars on, simply cannot happen. Military applications. Here's where it gets serious from a national security perspective. Every guided missile, every jet engine, every satellite system, every laser targeting device uses rare earths. The U.S. military is completely dependent on these materials. An F-35 fighter jet uses about 920 pounds of rare earth materials. A Virginia-class nuclear submarine uses nearly 4 tons. Without rare earths, modern warfare as we know it doesn't exist. Medical equipment, that MRI machine that can detect cancer or diagnose brain injuries, it needs rare earth elements for the superconducting magnets. X-ray tubes use rare earths. Even some cancer treatment drugs are made with yttrium. Computing and communications. The hard drive storing your data uses rare earth magnets. The fiber optic cables transmitting your internet use rare earth doped glass. LED lights use rare earth phosphors. The entire digital infrastructure of modern civilization depends on these elements. The vitamins of modern industry analogy. This is why experts call rare earths the vitamins of modern industry. Think about how vitamins work in your body. You only need tiny amounts, maybe a few milligrams per day, but without them, your entire body stops functioning properly. You get scurvy without vitamin C, rickets without vitamin D, anemia without B12. Rare earths work exactly the same way in technology. You only need small amounts, sometimes just a few grams in a device, sometimes a few kilograms in a vehicle. But without them, the technology simply doesn't work. And here's the critical part. For most applications, there are no viable substitutes. You can't just swap in a different material. Scientists have been trying for decades to find alternatives, and they've had limited success. Without rare earths, modern technology doesn't just get worse or more expensive, it literally grinds to a halt. That's not hyperbole, that's engineering reality. Let me give you some specific examples so you understand exactly what each of these elements does. Neodymium creates the strongest permanent magnets known to science. These neodymium magnets are what make electric motors powerful and compact. Tesla and every other EV manufacturer relies on neodymium iron-boron magnets. Without neodymium, electric vehicles would either be impossibly heavy or impossibly weak. There's really no way around it. Dysprosium is added to those neodymium magnets to give them heat resistance. When electric motors run, they get hot. Without dysprosium, those magnets would lose their magnetic properties at high temperatures. This element is absolutely critical for high-performance applications, which is why it is one of the most expensive rare earths, sometimes costing over $300 per kilogram. Europium and terbium create the red and green colors in your display screens and LED lights. Every television, every smartphone screen, every computer monitor uses these elements to produce accurate colors. Without them, we'd be back to black and white displays or extremely poor color quality. Yttrium shows up everywhere: camera lenses, LED lights, and even in cancer treatment drugs like yttrium-90 used in radiation therapy. It's one of the more versatile rare earths and, consequently, one of the most in demand. Lanthanum is used in hybrid car batteries, camera lenses, and studio lighting. Toyota's Prius uses about 10 to 15 kilograms of lanthanum in its battery pack. I could go on, but you get the picture. Each of these elements has unique properties that make it irreplaceable in specific applications. This isn't about convenience or cost optimization. This is about fundamental physics and chemistry. You can't engineer your way around needing these materials. Now, let's talk numbers, because this shows you why the stakes are so high. The global rare earth market is currently worth about $8 to $10 billion annually. Now, that might not sound huge compared to the oil market or the semiconductor market. But here's the thing, that $8 minus $10 billion in rare earths enables approximately $7 trillion worth of downstream products and technologies. That's an incredible multiplier effect, and demand is exploding. The market is growing at 10 to 12% per year, which means it's doubling roughly every 6 to 7 years. But even that doesn't capture the full picture. The electric vehicle revolution is the real game changer. Global EV sales are expected to grow from about 14 million vehicles in 2023 to potentially 40 to 50 million by 2030. Each EV uses significantly more rare earths than a traditional car. Analysts predict that rare earth demand from EVs alone will triple by 2030, in just 6 years from now. Wind energy is another massive demand driver. As countries try to meet their climate commitments, they're installing wind turbines at unprecedented rates. Each offshore wind turbine uses hundreds of pounds of rare earth magnets. China, Europe, and the US are all racing to expand wind capacity. Add in the growth of consumer electronics, 5G infrastructure, defense spending, and medical equipment, and you're looking at a supply crunch that could define the next decade of geopolitics. This is why China's control over rare earth supply chains gives them enormous leverage. They're not just controlling $10 billion worth of minerals, they're recontrolling the materials that enable the entire technological future of human civilization. Transition to next section. So now that you understand what rare earths are and why they're so critical, the next question is obvious. How did China end up controlling 70% of production and 90% of processing? Was it luck, natural resources, or was it something more deliberate? The answer is going to surprise you, because China's rare earth dominance wasn't an accident. It was one of the most successful long-term strategic plays in modern geopolitical history. Let me show you how they did it. India's position in the rare earth supply chain now. Here's where this story gets really interesting. India, the country caught in the middle of this rare earth standoff, actually has some of the largest rare earth deposits in the world. So the obvious question is, if India has its own rare earths, why is it so dependent on Chinese imports? And why does China see India as such a critical pressure point? The answer reveals a lot about the complexity of rare earth economics and why breaking China's dominance is so incredibly difficult. India's rare earth resources. Let me start with what India actually has. India possesses significant rare earth deposits, estimated at around 6 to 7 million tons of reserves. That puts India among the countries with the world's largest rare earth reserves, right up there with China, Vietnam, Brazil, and Russia. Most of India's rare earth deposits are found in beach sands along the coastlines of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Odisha. These mineral-rich sands contain something called monazite, which is a mineral that contains both rare earth elements and thorium, a radioactive element. This is important, and we'll come back to why in just a moment. On paper, India should be self-sufficient in rare earths. The country has the resources, it has a growing manufacturing sector that desperately needs these materials, and it has every strategic reason to develop domestic production. So what's the problem? Why India imports despite having reserves? The problem comes down to two major challenges: regulatory hurdles and technical capacity gaps. First, the regulatory nightmare. Remember how I mentioned that India's monazite sands contain thorium? Well, thorium is radioactive and is covered under India's Atomic Energy Act. This means that mining and processing monazite requires special licenses, clearances, and oversight from India's Department of Atomic Energy. The bureaucratic process is incredibly complex, slow, and restrictive. Environmental clearances add another layer of difficulty. Rare earth extraction is messy and polluting. We talked about that when discussing China's environmental trade-offs. In India, getting environmental approval for new mining or processing facilities can take years, sometimes decades. Projects get tied up in courts, face local opposition, and struggle with regulatory uncertainty. Second, and this is the real killer, technical capacity gaps. India can mine rare earths. That's the easy part. But mining is only the first step. The real challenge is separation and refining, taking the raw ore and separating it into individual rare earth elements that can actually be used in manufacturing. This separation technology is extraordinarily complex and expensive. It requires sophisticated chemical processes, specialized equipment, and technical expertise that takes years to develop. China has spent decades building this infrastructure and training specialized workers. India simply doesn't have that capacity yet. Here's the reality. India currently has very limited rare earth separation and refining infrastructure. The country has one primary entity handling this, Indian Rare Earths Limited, or IREL, a government company. But IREL's capacity is nowhere near sufficient to meet India's rapidly growing demand. They can produce some basic rare earth compounds, but for the high purity, specialized rare earth products that modern manufacturing requires, India is heavily dependent on imports from China. Think about it this way. India can dig rare earth ore out of the ground, but it can't efficiently turn that ore into the neodymium magnets that Tata Motors needs for electric vehicles or the europium that electronics manufacturers need for displays. For those processed materials, Indian companies have to buy from China, what India imports from China. So what exactly is India importing? We're talking about processed rare earth compounds and elements, the refined materials ready for manufacturing. We're talking about rare earth magnets and alloy materials. We're talking about intermediate products that go into components for electronics, vehicles, and defense equipment. The financial value of these imports runs into hundreds of millions of dollars annually. That might not sound enormous in the context of India's overall trade with China, which is well over $100 billion. But remember, these materials are strategic. They're the bottleneck materials that enable much larger industries, and India's demand is exploding. Why? Because India is rapidly expanding its technology manufacturing. The Make in India initiative, launched by Prime Minister Modi, is driving massive growth in electronics manufacturing. Companies like Apple, Samsung, and Xiaomi are setting up major production facilities in India. But every smartphone, every laptop, every piece of electronics needs rare earths. India's electric vehicle industry is taking off. Tata Motors is investing billions in EV production. Mahindra Electric, Ola Electric, and others are scaling up. The government is pushing EV adoption aggressively. But every electric motor needs rare earth magnets. Defense manufacturing is a huge priority for India. The Atmanirbhar Bharat, or self-reliant India policy, aims to reduce dependence on foreign weapons imports. India wants to manufacture its own missiles, radar systems, fighter jets, and electronic warfare equipment, but all of that requires rare earths. And there's the renewable energy push, wind turbines, and solar infrastructure. India has committed to massive renewable energy expansion as part of its climate goals. More wind turbines mean more rare earth magnets. All of this means India's rare earth demand is growing much faster than domestic production capacity can possibly keep up. The gap between what India can produce and what India needs is widening every year. Current vulnerabilities, this creates obvious strategic vulnerabilities. India has high dependence on Chinese supplies for critical industries. There are limited alternative suppliers. Australia's Linnes Corporation is one option, but their capacity is limited and they're already supplying other markets. Growing demand is outpacing domestic capacity by a wide margin. This creates strategic vulnerability in critical sectors: defense, technology, green energy. These aren't just economic issues, they're national security issues. If China decides to restrict or cut off rare earth exports to India, entire sectors of the Indian economy could face serious disruption. And this is exactly why China's demand for written guarantees is so potent. China knows India is vulnerable. China knows India can't quickly replace Chinese supplies. And China is using that leverage to try to control how India engages with the United States. India's diversification efforts now. India isn't sitting idle. The government and private sector are working on diversification. But progress is slow and the challenges are substantial. On the domestic front, Indian Rare Earths Limited has expansion plans. The government has announced intentions to build new separation facilities and boost processing capacity. There's talk of bringing in private sector participation to accelerate development. But here's the reality: building rare earth processing infrastructure takes years, not months. We're talking about 5 to 10 years before India could achieve anything close to self-sufficiency in rare earth processing. In the meantime, the dependence on China continues. On the international partnership front, India is exploring multiple options. There have been discussions with Australia's Lynas Corporation about potential collaboration, maybe processing Australian rare earth ore in India, or technology transfer to help India build its own processing capacity. India is exploring partnerships with American companies as well, particularly in light of U.S. government support for alternative rare earth supply chains. India is also looking at African sources. Countries like Madagascar and South Africa have rare earth deposits, and Indian companies have shown interest in investments there. But again, all of this takes time and massive capital investment. And then there's the Quad connection. The Quad, the partnership between the United States, Japan, Australia, and India, has explicitly identified critical minerals cooperation as a key agenda item. Rare earths are mentioned in joint statements. There's talk of building alternative supply chains that bypass China entirely. In March 2023, the Quad leaders committed to mapping critical mineral supply chains and identifying opportunities for partnership. The idea is that Australia mines the rare earths, India processes them once capacity is built, Japan and the US provide technology and investment, and together they create a non-Chinese supply chain. It sounds great on paper, but the implementation, that's where it gets complicated. Australia is years away from significantly expanding production. India is years away from having processing capacity. And during all this time, India still needs rare earths for its manufacturing sector, which means continuing to buy from China. Setting up the next section so you can see the dilemma India faces. The country has long-term plans to reduce dependence on China, but short-term reality is that Indian manufacturers need Chinese rare earths right now. Indian companies can't wait 5 to 10 years for domestic capacity to come online. They have orders to fill, products to manufacture, and businesses to run. And that's exactly when China decided to make its move. That's when China demanded written guarantees that rare earths imported by India would not be diverted to the United States.